Hello and welcome. I'm Claire Feldman, your host and guide on this journey to thriving in private practice without the burnout. Are you a passionate therapist who's struggling with the entrepreneurial side of things? Do you wish you could serve great fit clients at times that suit you? Are you seeking financial stability so you can continue doing what you love? If so, then you're in the right place. I know firsthand the difficulties of navigating the business aspects of therapy, from building a website to managing social media, but I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. Together we'll explore how you can build and grow your dream practice. So let's get started. So Leslie, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, me too. Thank you.
Maybe before we get started, could you just introduce yourself?
Yes, so my name's Leslie Kollikho. I'm an integrative psychotherapist. And yeah, I'm really, when you approached me and I read about this, I thought it was such a worthy thing to have for private practice. So yeah, and I've been working in private practice for a few years now. And I consider myself quite a creative therapist. And I think that shows in the content I put out. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely shows in your Instagram, and we'll get into this in a little minute. But do you hand draw your?
No, I don't. People often ask me that.
Yeah.
I wish I had that talent. No, but it's a wonderful app, Canva app.
Yeah.
They have thousands of images. So I do take a long time thinking of an appropriate image because I do work with imagery a lot in my practice. So unfortunately, I'm not talented in that way.
No, but it looks, that's amazing. It's a good skill because it looks like you've actually hand drawn it. So it
Yes,
looks
well, it is choosing what image fits with the words. So I'd say that in itself was a bit of a skill, but no, I'm not very good at drawing.
Well, we'll get into the Instagram and all of that in a little second. But just before we kind of hit record, we were having a chat about our journeys, and we actually have had quite a similar journey in terms of what led us into private practice. So maybe if you'd like to share kind of what your journey has been.
Yes, of course. So I was working in a private eating disorder hospital, a psychiatric hospital, and I had been there for around 5 years since the end of my training up until about 2.5 years ago. So just before the pandemic kind of hit, really. And I loved it. I gained so much experience. Eating disorders is my speciality. So I learned so much from that environment. But I was reaching a point where I was just quite burnt out. It was a big hospital. I was one of the only therapists there. And I had always seen private clients in evenings. I'd rented a room near where I live. And then when the pandemic happened, everything went online. And I actually found so many more people were reaching out to me for therapy. And before I knew it, I was kind of doing 2 full-time jobs alongside one another. And it kind of just gave me the leap to go into private practice fully. So I gave in my 3-month notice and I worked that. And then in January, 2.5 years ago, I went fully into private practice and I have not looked back. It has just enhanced my life so much.
Amazing. When you were in that position of you were still working in that job and starting in private practice, where were you sourcing most of your clients just out of interest in your private practice?
I had a profile on Psychology Today. I was also on UKCP, their website. I had my own website. I always think it's a good idea to have your own website because you can put a lot more information on that. I was also for a little while on the Black and Asian website, the Batan website. So I had profiles on those and all of my clients came through there. But also a lot were word of mouth and networking and people referring them on to me.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's so important, particularly when you're getting started in private practice, is building those relationships around you and building that network.
Absolutely, yes, and having a niche. So, people would often come to me for eating disorder or body image concerns. So once your name starts getting affiliated with a certain condition, psychological condition, then often people will seek you out in that sense. That's what I found anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you have set up your private practice and that's going really well. And the reason why I came across you was through your Instagram account, Tips for Therapists.
Yes.
And then when I kind of started looking at what you do, you've kind of got your fingers in a few little pies. And
Mhm.
that's what I think a lot of therapists will do nowadays. And I think it's a brilliant thing to do is to have that variety of different sources of income, different opportunities. Not that you want to be spreading yourself too thin, but that you're doing things that give you variety, give you extra income opportunities, but also where you're using your skill set, can nearly speak, your skill set to support you.
Absolutely. I think it wasn't really a conscious decision, I don't think. I think I just kind of fell into it in a way. I mean, who knows what was going on unconsciously, but I think it's so important to diversify your practice. I think some people are very happy having just a client load, and that's brilliant if that's what you want. But I think for my own well-being, and I think it makes me a better therapist as well, that I'm not just seeing clients 5 days a week. That diversity in my practice, I think, has been so useful. And it's something I actively encourage with my supervisees, and I encourage for myself.
Yeah, and that's just actually brought up something I was thinking there, that it's great to have that variety, but also, like you mentioned about having a niche, that you had kind of a clear niche, that you were getting recommendations, you were filling your practice, and then kind of starting to look more into other opportunities. I wouldn't necessarily recommend for someone maybe just getting started in private practice to try and do too many things if they're not getting
Absolutely.
want to also kind of find your niche, find your way of marketing, promoting yourself, fill your practice. And then when you know that you're kind of okay over here, then this is where kind of to explore what other opportunities there are.
Absolutely. I think it's important to take it one step at a time and to work towards your strengths. I really like writing, for example. So on the Instagram page, a lot of more than I'd anticipated, but there's a lot of work that goes into creating that content. And I found I had to write a lot. And so I set up a blog, a Tips for Therapist blog alongside it. So I could write something that was richer perhaps than an Instagram caption. And so I'm playing to my strengths and my enjoyment, because I think, as therapists, the work we do is very meaningful, but it's very difficult work. And I think we have to give a lot of ourselves. And so I found by having that variety, it just keeps me, I don't know, my enthusiasm and my energy for the work is still high, many, many years later.
So how did the Instagram account come about?
Quite organically, I like Instagram. I'd had my own personal Instagram for many years, and I had a therapy Instagram, but I didn't put a lot of effort into it. And when I was going into private practice, I wanted to be very intentional about making connections with other therapists. So I just started the page really on a bit of a whim. I didn't have much of an idea of what I was going to do in it. Initially, I was doing a general mental health page, and they're fantastic, but I think Instagram is kind of saturated with that. And so I wanted to do something different. So I put out a post to other therapists, and I got so much engagement, and I thought, okay, maybe I'm onto something here. And that's where it grew. So it was quite an organic idea, but it was born out of me being intentional about meeting other therapists and having that connection with others, because I predominantly work from home and it can be isolating. So knowing I can go onto Instagram and I can talk to other people, and it helps my kind of therapeutic world seem a lot bigger.
And it's grown quite significantly because you've got nearly 7,000 followers, haven't you, in around 2 years?
Yes, yes. I was quite surprised about that actually. And it's been lovely. And I think often I was saying to you before that sometimes we think the numbers are the important thing. And of course, numbers matter, but I think it's the engagement. And I have such a wonderful, rich and diverse community of mostly therapists, and they all contribute, because the page wouldn't be what it was if it wasn't for the interactions that I have. So I feel so fortunate and so lucky that it's grown in that way. And yeah, and the numbers just keep on kind of adding, which is wonderful, because it's more new perspectives then.
And I think it's because what you post is often quite thought-provoking.
I try to be, and I'm a little bit provocative
I
sometimes.
think you are.
That once or twice, but I guess, part of being a therapist is, fostering and developing empathy. And that means understanding other people's points of views. And I think as therapists, we're human. We can get very caught up in just our way of thinking or our training's way of thinking. Whereas, for example, on Mondays, I put out a question to the community called, Is it okay to? Is it okay for a therapist to? And then I end it with something. So it was born out of the idea that I was doing a session one day and I'd made a hot drink. And I thought, when I do my in-person sessions, I never drink hot drinks, but online I do. So I just casually put it up to the community and said, is it okay for a therapist to drink in sessions? And people started commenting. And then that was like, that sparked something. And so every Monday, I've done about 60 plus questions. Is it okay for a therapist to cry in sessions? Is it okay for a therapist to hug a client? Is it okay for a therapist to use their client's business? And I think these are questions that never came up during training. And it's so interesting to have people's perspectives and to change my own perspectives and my own judgments of certain things. So a lot of the engagement comes from these questions that I put out in the community.
Yeah, and I think the one that caught my attention was that is it okay to swear?
Yes, that was a reason.
I thought there was
I
a
had,
discussion.
I had so many responses. There are some passionate swearers out there.
See, I would be in that camp, but again, there was people that were like, no, absolutely,
Yeah.
it's professional. But it's really good because it is, they are slightly provocative, they are thought-provoking questions, but like you said, they're not questions that anybody talked about in your training. But these are the things that therapists will sit and wonder and like maybe even be scared to ask. So the fact that you're
Exactly.
putting it out there on Instagram and making it a normal conversation to have is brilliant.
Absolutely. I think, for so long, there's this idea of this blank slate therapist who's sitting there as the expert. And really, therapy's changing. It's not about that anymore. And I think we're bringing a lot more of our humanity into the work. And so these are questions that some of the community have asked me to put out because they've been battling with this and they don't want to bring it to supervision or to their training because they're scared of what people will think. And I think we have to ask these questions. If we're hoping that our clients can come into sessions and share those deepest, darkest parts of themselves and to really question things, we have to be able to do that too, I believe.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, some of these questions, they have, before I press send, I'm like, oh, should I ask it? And you know what? I'm like, just put it out there. And some people have been adamant, they completely disagree with me. And you know what? That's absolutely fine because it's helped my thinking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you kind of had said earlier that there's not many other therapists that are doing accounts for other therapists in this way.
Yes, absolutely. I've seen lots of therapists do a mixture. And there's a few I've seen, but probably I can count them on one hand that I've seen anyway that are just catering to other therapists. So there's definitely something in that because I know I really like when I'm seeing other therapists giving tips and ideas and questions. And so yeah, I'm glad to be a part of that small group.
Yeah, so we know engagement is really important when it comes to Instagram. How much time, just out of curiosity, how much time do you give to the social media side of it?
Oh, it varies. I've had such a mixed relationship with it. At the moment, I limit myself to 30 minutes a day on social media, and it
That's
used to be a
good.
lot. Yeah, it used to be a lot higher, and I did it out of necessity because I also found myself feeling, wanting to go on it less and wanting to engage less. And I thought, actually, I really enjoy this community, so I need to be intentional in how I use it and how I approach it. So creating the content takes longer, and I do that outside of Instagram. But nowadays, I tend to post twice a week. It used to be a lot more. So I tend to post twice a week now, so I can keep that to the half an hour most days.
Yeah, it's a fine line, isn't it? Between what's actually helpful for me and what's harmful when it comes to social media.
Absolutely. And I don't, there's been times when I've been caught up in, oh, I need to keep up with the algorithm and I need to do this. But actually, I don't want to put out content that I don't feel something about, that isn't meaningful to me. I don't just want to put things out so people engage. I'd rather people engage meaningfully, but in smaller numbers. So I think before I kind of got caught up in, oh, I have to post 5 times a week. And that was just too much. And I wasn't putting out things that I necessarily felt really proud of. Whereas now I can say that everything I put out, I've really thought about it, and it still gets good engagement, but I'm not playing too much into Instagram's game.
And does all the inspiration for your posts tend to come from your community or just things that you're kind of reflecting on yourself?
Yeah, I mean, a mixture. It could come from a CPD I do. It could come from, my own supervision. It could come from a supervisee. It could come from a session I've had with a client. There was one thing that came out. I was seeing a client, and I used to have a strong countertransference of wanting a hot chocolate every time I saw them. And I really, I wrestled with that. I was like, what does that mean? And I spent time thinking about it. And then I wrote a post about it. And then I got so much ideas, and people have said, I've craved this. And especially if you're an eating disorder therapist, as you will know, you can often get lots of strange cravings and bodily sensations working with people. So something like that, it comes out of my practice and the people in my world, really.
You'd made the comment there about therapy being different nowadays, and I do think there definitely has been, certainly since COVID as well, a huge shift in how therapy is perceived, but also in how we build relationships, how we connect with each other, how we market ourselves. I think that has very much changed as well. And I think like what I really loved is the fact that you have built a community on Instagram, but also have started a new community on WhatsApp, which would never in a million years occur to me to think about using WhatsApp as a community, but it's a great idea.
Yes, well, it was quite an organic one. I'm in lots of different kind of networking bubbles, and so I've been part of this group on WhatsApp, and we meet once a month online on Zoom. And it's just called the Therapist Forum, and we started in COVID. And it's such a useful source because, if I need a question about insurance or I have something come up, I can just put it in the group. And on Instagram, I realize I get so many lovely messages from people just saying, your page is wonderful, and it's really helped me feel less alone, or it's, just really wonderful stuff. Somebody wrote about it in their dissertation, another person did a presentation on it. Like it was, beyond what I could ever imagine. And I just thought one day, actually, it would be really nice to have a more immediate way of connecting with people. And so I didn't even know WhatsApp did communities. And I looked on it one day, and I was going to set up a group. And it just said, would you like to set up a community? So I had a look, and I thought, yeah, this is what the tips is. It's a community. And what I like about that is, even though it's one big umbrella, tips for therapists, there's different subgroups in it. So people can pick and choose what they like. So there's a CPD group, there's a books and articles group, there's kind of like a general dilemmas group, and there's like a chit chat just, for therapists. And there's over 1,000 people in that community. And it's been really wonderful. And I don't have to police it or facilitate it. Everybody's very thoughtful and considerate of other people, even when there's differing opinions. So it's been a really lovely resource.
It's amazing. How do you think that has maybe helped you in your own kind of practice and in your own work, having that community?
It's been, I'll put some things that I'm going through. I was looking for a book on ADHD recently, and I put the one that I was currently reading. And some people had kind of told me their thoughts about it. They had ADHD themselves, and they'd read this book, and there were certain things they disagreed on. So it really opened up a discussion that I might not have had if I just read the book, and other people recommended other things and other ways of thinking about it. So it's been so useful in that way. People share CPDs. So that's been really useful as well, to find out what CPDs other people are doing. So it's opened my horizon in that sense. So it's been a really wonderful resource for me to connect with people. And, I kind of know if I'm going through something and I don't really know where to bring it, I can bring it to this group. And I know somebody there out of that thousands of people is going to have an answer for me.
And I imagine within that community, then you kind of get to know each other, you get to know what people's specialisms are, and that you have somebody that you can kind of refer to and recommend.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have general conversations as well, and there is a referral group there. So, somebody came to me and, I had a friend who needed therapy, but obviously, and I wasn't really sure who to refer them to. And I put it out in the group. And then, a few people came back to me and I was able to offer this person, 5 different potential therapists. And so that was really welcome too. And yeah, so it's been really useful in so many different ways.
Fab. What I would love to hear about is your CPD that you
Yeah.
do. I know, like, obviously, you have built that community of therapists, and when you're going to deliver CPD, you're going to be delivering that to other therapists. So you already have a lovely engaged audience that are already following. So I imagine that must be quite helpful when it comes to marketing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's so many wonderful CPDs out there, but there are so many CPDs, especially now that we're doing a lot of them online. So, and, especially with the cost of living crisis, people are being really intentional about what they're spending their money on. And I think one of the benefits of having the Instagram community is that people know me a bit. They know how I work. So they're not buying into something that they have no idea about. And I think that's been really helpful because I've put on quite a few different CPDs over the years. So I started off with eating disorders, and then I've done more creative interventions with eating disorders. I've done holistic food and eating. I've done self-harm. I've got a workshop on working with postcards in therapy coming up in a few weeks. And what I found is that I'm getting lots of repeat people coming on to, or they'll say, I really enjoyed that CPD. What are you doing next? I'd like to join. So I think it's building a sense of people know how I work and they like how I work. And so that's been really helpful in creating an audience, I guess, for my workshops.
And is it mostly through your community is how you would kind of sell your CPD, or do you market in any other places?
I do a few. I'd say probably 75% of sales come from my Instagram community. So I set it up on Eventbrite and I do share it because I think on Instagram you can do demos and you can kind of put them up a bit. I also put it on my LinkedIn. So sometimes I get some through there, less, but a little bit. I'm also part of different therapy forums. So the one I mentioned before, which is like an online one and a WhatsApp one. I'm also part of an email forum, which has probably 50,000 therapists on or something. It's been going on for years. And so it's just an email exchange. So I'll put it out on that too. And I get feedback. Also word of mouth. People will contact me saying, I went to your CPD a few weeks ago. I really loved it. Can you do one for my company or this company? So yes, so lots of different pockets, but the main one I think would be Instagram. And I really do think it's because people have a sense of who I am and how I work already.
Yeah, it's just while you were talking there, it just brought up a little kind of thought in my mind about how many of us are in kind of Facebook communities and forums and things like that. And it's making me think about how do we, if you have any kind of advice around how do we engage in those forums so that people do get to kind of know us as well? Because like you said, like people are buying your CPD and they're becoming repeat because they get to know you, they like your style. But if you are a therapist that's in many of these counselling Facebook communities and things that we have, how do you become maybe known in there? How should you engage in there to help you with building up these kind of relationships?
Yes, great question. And I think that the first thing that comes to mind is I think you actually have to engage in them. There's no use being a part of, 20 different groups if you only post when you want people to buy into your service. So I think commenting on other people's work, attending other people's CPDs, I've been to other people's CPDs on Instagram and they in turn come to mine and then we spread the word as well. I think, when people contact me on Instagram, I might have missed one or two, but generally I respond to everybody. I respond to every DM. I interact with all of the comments because I think if people have taken the time to interact with me and my content, you know, the least I can do is do that. And so I answer questions. I do put Q&As out quite often, not that often, but, you know, every few months. So I think you really have to be intentional with your engagement. I think, you know, I might have some people who message me and they might say, oh, I'll follow you if you follow me. And I won't do it. I really don't like that sort of interaction, because for me, it's not personal. It's just, I need to get another follower. Whereas actually, if you're interested in my work and you want to follow me, great. If you don't, that's great too. And I'm not going to follow somebody just because, you know, for you to get a number. So I think it's about being congruent, it's about being genuine, and it's being intentional with your engagement.
Yeah, I think that is so important and so valuable what you've just said there, because you will see sometimes in communities people posting and saying, I'm accepting referrals, I'm looking for referrals. But if I'm a therapist and I'm sitting and I'm full and I'm looking to refer on, you're not going to refer on to someone who you don't know.
Absolutely, and nor should you. And I think that's the thing, is you want to have a sense of how that person is and how they work. Of course, you can't know completely, but I don't want to play a part in referring somebody onto somebody that might not be the best fit for them. You know, of course, you can't always guarantee, but I think you have to kind of know somebody a little bit. And I think that's the same with CPDs. If you're going to a big company for CPDs like Tavistock or something like that, you know the company, they have a reputation. Nowadays, lots more kind of individual therapists are offering CPDs, which I think is amazing, is an untapped resource. But I wouldn't really want to buy into a CPD if I didn't know something about the therapist beforehand and how they work.
And something, again, another question that's just come to my mind when you're talking is, I think that there is this blanket belief that you can only do CPD if it is like through a CPD certified, accredited body, and you've got the tick on the certificate. That's not true though, is it?
No, it's not. It's not true. No.
The CPD can be podcasts, it can be books, it can be anything. So
absolutely,
therapist that has, you know, a special interest and knowledge, has experience, has something that they could share that would be really helpful to other therapists. That is a CPD opportunity just waiting to happen.
Absolutely. Yes. You know, I think it's important that you check with your organizing member. You know, I'm with UKCP, and there's so many different things which go towards CPD. So when I fill out my yearly form for UKCP, they want to know what journal articles I've read, what podcasts I've listened to. They also want to know that sort of, you know, there's continuous professional and personal development. And I often think that second P gets missed, that personal development. I did a creative group for 10 weeks, you know, and it wasn't strictly therapy, but it really helped me as a therapist, you know, so that goes on to it. I went on a retreat for a few days, you know, and we did lots of workshops and inner child work. That is also CPD. So I think you don't have to necessarily be accredited in that way, but you need to have some specialism. You know, I felt comfortable doing CPDs on food and body image because I have a qualification in it, and I've been working in the field for now 8 years. In that particular field. So absolutely, I think if you have a passion and you're good at it and you've studied it and you've worked in it for a long time, absolutely, there's going to be people out there who can learn from you.
So I think that's really important for people to hear that you do not have to have this like certification, this kind of tick to your name to be able to do it. But I think what actually will be the biggest barrier, perhaps, is imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
I don't know. Me too.
I don't know if it ever completely goes away, but what I do know is that, you know, you kind of do it anyway. You know, I often, somebody said this to me once, that people who are imposters don't really think that they're imposters, you know. And I think if you're thinking that you have an imposter syndrome, you probably are not an imposter, just from the mere fact that you're considering it anyway. And I think, you know what, put it out there because you learn. So after every CPD event that I do, I send out like a survey. It's an anonymous survey. And I ask for, you know, I really want constructive criticism. And, you know, the first time it might be a bit, ouch, or they said this or they said that, but actually I've used it to improve moving forward. So it's not about aiming for perfection, which I often think, you know, imposter syndrome links into into, this idea that we need to be perfect and then we can't fail at anything. But if you don't try, then you're never going to learn and grow. So I think most of us have imposter syndrome. I think we've just got to push ourselves to do it anyway and see what happens.
Absolutely. And would you have any tips for maybe someone that's watching that is thinking, do you know, I'm interested in maybe setting up a little CPD workshop and doing something? Any suggestions on how to get started?
Good question. I would say I think social media is a brilliant way of connecting with people. So I think if they don't have a social media presence already, I think go for it. Just set up a little page. It's not about getting thousands and thousands of followers. That can help. But I know people who have about, 1,500 or 2,000, and they put on wonderful CPDs. I don't think the numbers. So I think putting yourself out there, because there's going to be some people out there that like what you're providing and engage with what you're bringing. So I think just making that first step and building up a little small community so that you can kind of test the waters. And I think often once you have that community, you can also cater. So I will ask the question, what CPDs are you interested in having? And people will send me lots of different ideas. And some of them I'm not qualified to do. And so I'll point them in a direction of someone who can. But other ones I'll say, that's a really good idea. I'm going to think about that. It's kind of how my postcard one came up recently, is people were asking me about how to work creatively in therapy. And I thought I could do a quick workshop on this. I would say to people, just start. Wherever it is, just start, because nothing's going to come from nothing unless you make that first step.
And it's amazing when you think about it, like the creative workshop you're doing around using postcards in therapy, like something like that I have knowledge of this, I have a skill of this, and it's turning into income for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's quite good income. Absolutely. The thing is, like so far, I think I've sold about 20 tickets, which is, quite big, actually. I tend to keep my groups quite small. But, those 20 people, they're going to tell one person each, and it spreads and it spreads and it spreads. And then, I can put on the same workshop. Once you've done the initial hard work of creating all of the slides, after that, it's just tweaking them a little bit and then putting out the workshop. And it is a really lovely, I wouldn't say it's passive income, because it is work, but it's something slightly different from your client work, and it uses, I think, different parts of the brain and different type of energy. Yeah, and I think it's a really great way of connecting with people and having some other income.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, once you've done it once you've kind of got feedback, you've fine-tuned it, you have a product there that is sitting that you can just kind of reuse and reuse.
Absolutely, yes. And you'll have different people, and there's always new therapists, qualifying every year. And so, when I first started doing the eating disorder CPDs, I've now tweaked it into different ways. So I've done one which is a strict kind of eating disorder, how you work with chronic illnesses. But the last one I delivered was more holistic. So we were talking about the early relationship with food and eating and how that impacts, because actually we might not all work with somebody who has an eating disorder, but we all work with people who eat food. And we all have a relationship with food in our body. And so, it's kind of tweaking it a little bit to perhaps suit different audiences. But once you have that core package, that information, a lot of the hard work is done. And I love, as you can probably tell, talking. I love talking, and I love meeting new people and finding out new ideas and sharing things. And I think those workshops are a great way of doing that.
Yeah. And do you tend to do that always virtually?
Yes, I've done a few in person. So I actually started doing them in person, but they don't reach as many people, obviously. I'm in North London, so people will come if they live in a kind of local area. But when you're online, you can reach so many more people. So I do like working online. I'd say half my practice is in person and half of it is online. But most of my workshops tend to be online at the moment.
Okay. It's been really lovely to have these kind of conversations with all different therapists, because they've had different creative ways, I guess, of branching outside of the one-to-one, creating kind of or no, I don't like the word passive income either, because it makes it sound like it's really easy when it's not really easy, but other sources of income, which is amazing. Sinead, I don't know if you know, from Intuitive Eating Ireland, is doing like a retreat, her
Yeah,
first retreat abroad
yeah.
this year. So I thought it's just so lovely to hear like CPD and doing retreats and doing courses, like the opportunities that are actually there. I think sometimes when we get creative and when we get out of our own way,
Mhm.
what's possible, like this summit,
Ah,
just
yeah,
doing a summit is something
absolutely.
different.
Yeah, and I think, you know what, you haven't, I feel like there's more to lose by not trying than
Mm,
trying and putting yourself out there. Because even if you fail, and, you know, what is an even failure? At
mm,
least you've tried something. You know, I started a tips for therapists. It was just a sharing forum, and it was online, and I did a few of them, but actually it wasn't working out in the way that I wanted it to. And the first one reached like 25 people, and then the numbers were dwindling and dwindling. And I just thought, you know what, I've tried it, but it's not working right now. But I've given it a go. So it might go under my list of failures, but at
mm,
least I tried. And, you know, I saw that actually the market might not be there for that. But a WhatsApp group where
mm.
people can choose when they engage in that has been brilliant. So,
Yeah.
you know, I wouldn't have necessarily learned that if I hadn't have had a failure beforehand.
I think that's such a lovely, lovely way of putting it, that there isn't actually a failure. Everything is a learning, but if you don't try, you're never
Absolutely.
gonna know. And it'd be such a shame to have that regret of never stepping outside that kind of comfort zone and trying it.
Absolutely. You know, I think if I hadn't have done that, I would still be in the psychiatric hospital, completely burnt out and just really not necessarily living the best life I could as a therapist. And, you know, so much of what has happened to me, like I say, hasn't necessarily been, I'm not the most business-minded person. So I haven't consciously thought, oh, I need to make this money and do this and that. Great if you are that way, but I'm just not. So a lot of it has just been born out of my wanting to connect with other people and wanting to share what I have and to gain knowledge from other people. Because when I do my workshops, they're always very interactive. I don't record them
Mm.
because I want people to feel free to share. And I found that when I recorded them in the past, people weren't as open. And
Mm.
I learn as much from everyone else as I think they learn from me, because through that sharing. So you don't need to be this kind of professional business person, and you just need to kind of put it out there and give it a go and see what
Yeah.
happens.
What you're saying actually just completely echoes what like some of the other therapists have said. There was no strategy behind it. There was no like real business mindset, but there was a passion. There was a passion and I guess a determination.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
know that they were going to try it no matter what. Like Sarah was like, every week she committed to herself that she was going to post a video no matter what. And I think maybe that for yourself as well, that you were doing it because you felt passionate about it, because those relationships are really important to you, that drives you, and the
Absolutely.
kind of the success sort of follows it.
Yes, exactly. And I've met some people who are now friends of mine, you know, through Instagram and through networking. And it's lovely because I don't feel that sense of isolation that I could have possibly have felt being in private practice. And something you said there just made me think that often I think when we're in private practice, we don't realize that what we're doing is a business, and it very much is a business. And I think that can feel quite unsettling for some therapists, because I don't know about you, but in my training, we weren't taught about that sort of stuff
Not.
at all. So it's been learning on the job, literally. And I think sometimes I'm still uncomfortable with the idea that it's a business, but it is, you know, it's meaningful, it's an important relationship, but it's also my livelihood. And so I need to be able to balance those two things.
Yeah. And you deserve to make money for what you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, we all do.
I think that is a lovely little place to kind of to round up that interview. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. Thank you.
Just before you pop off, can you just remind people where to find you? Because they're definitely going to want to come and follow you.
Yes, so I am Leslie Kollikho, and it's tips for therapists. So it's tips underscore for underscore therapists. Even if you just Google my name, my blog, and my Instagram, and everything that I do will come up. And I have an Eventbrite and yeah, all of those lovely things. So
Super. Thank you so much, Leslie.
thank you so much.
So that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you found the episode helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could share it with other counsellors and therapists in private practice. If you'd like to find out more about me and how I can help you build and grow your private practice, hop on over to my website, which is www.prosperinprivatepractice.com, and you'll also find me on Instagram under the same name. But until next time, I will see you soon. Take care.